Mandarin Chinese. For a lot of people, just hearing those words can be a little intimidating. We hear about the writing with all its complex characters and the tones, and it's easy to think, no way. But here's the thing. Over 100 million people are learning it right now. So is it really as tough as its reputation suggests? Or is it just misunderstood?
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at why Mandarin seems so challenging. Then, we'll dive into the writing system and decode those characters. After that, we'll unlock the secret of tones. And then, here's a spoiler, we'll get to the surprisingly simple grammar. And finally, we'll come to a verdict.
All right, Section 1. Let's talk about that fierce reputation. Where does this idea that Mandarin is this incredibly difficult language actually come from?
Well, for most English speakers, it probably starts right here. You look at a character like this one, it means verbose, by the way, and it feels, well, completely alien. If you're used to an alphabet where letters represent sounds, a system of pure symbols can look like a totally unbreakable code. But is it an unbreakable code? Let's find out. In this next section, we're going to see how this very complex-looking system is actually built on a pretty logical foundation. There is, believe it or not, a method to the madness. So this is the big question, right? If you don't have letters to spell out words, how on earth do you write things down?
Our journey has to start with the characters themselves. They're called Hanzi. Now, the key thing to understand about a Hanzi is that it's not just a sound. It's a building block of meaning. Each one is an entire idea, a whole concept packed into a single symbol.
So these characters aren't just a random jumble of lines. They're constructed, piece by piece, in a very logical way. It all starts with basic pen movements, which we call strokes. A few strokes come together to form a component, and then one or more of those components click together to create a full character. It's almost like building with Lego bricks. You start with simple pieces to make something complex.
Now, some of these components are really special. We call them radicals. Think of a radical as a little category tag. It gives you a hint, a clue, about what that character's general meaning is all about. Let's see this in action, because this is where it gets really cool. Take a look at the little symbol on top of each of these three characters. That's called the grass radical. And look where it shows up, in the character for tea, for flower, and for vegetables. That one little component is a powerful clue that tells you right away that all these words have something to do with plants.
Characters can also team up to create new words, and often in a way that just makes perfect sense. For example, you take the character for fly, and you add it to the character for machine, and what do you get? Airplane, a flying machine. It's wonderfully logical when you see it like that.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. There are something like 50,000 characters in total. But, and this is a big but, here's the good news. You really only need to learn about 200 to 300 of the most common ones to start understanding a huge chunk of written Chinese. Suddenly, that mountain doesn't seem quite so high, does it?
Okay, we've had a look at the writing. Now let's tackle that other big challenge you always hear about, the sounds, and more specifically, the tones. Thankfully, you're not just thrown in the deep end. There's an amazing tool called Pinyin, and what it does is use the Roman alphabet, the one we all know, to show you how to pronounce each character. Really, Pinyin is like a set of training wheels for your pronunciation. It's a huge help.
So, what are tones? Well, put simply, it's about the pitch of your voice. The way your voice rises or falls on a single syllable can completely change the meaning. Take the syllable ma. If you say it with a high, flat pitch, ma, it means mother. If your voice rises, ma, it means hemp. A little dip and rise, ma, that's a horse. And a sharp, falling pitch, ma, means to scold. 4 totally different words.
And this is maybe the single most important thing to understand about pronunciation. The tone isn't just an accent or for flavor. It's not optional. It is a fundamental, inseparable part of the word itself. Getting the tone wrong is just like spelling a word in English with the wrong letters.
Okay, so we've dealt with the characters and the tones. I promise you're in for a very pleasant surprise now. Let's move on to grammar, because this is where Mandarin becomes, well, incredibly straightforward. Let's start with verbs. In English, we have to change our verbs, right? I go, but she goes. In Spanish or French, it's even more complicated. In Mandarin, the verb never ever changes. It's the same verb for I, you, she, he, we, they. There are 0 verb conjugations to memorize.
And it gets even better. Let's talk about plurals. In English, we add an S for apricots. In Mandarin, you don't do anything.
The word for apricot is exactly the same whether you're talking about one apricot or a whole bowl of them. The context tells you how many. So you might be wondering, how do you ask a question? It's remarkably easy. You just take your regular sentence and you add a tiny little word, a particle, to the end. To make a simple yes or no question, you just add the word ma. That's it. You're done.
Okay, so we've looked at the hard parts, and we've looked at the surprisingly easy parts. Let's put it all together now and come to a final verdict. How hard is Mandarin? Really? Well, let's be objective for a moment. It is a major time commitment. The US State Department actually classifies it as a super hard language for native English speakers. They estimate it takes about 88 weeks of dedicated study to get proficient. So yes, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
So really, here's the crucial takeaway. The difficulty in Mandarin is front-loaded. You have these two huge challenges right at the beginning, memorizing characters and mastering tones. But once you get over that initial hump, you get this huge relief, an incredibly simple, logical grammar with none of the complex rules that trip up learners in so many other languages. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. With its incredibly simple grammar but its very complex writing system, maybe Mandarin isn't just hard. Maybe its difficulty is just a misunderstanding. Maybe it's just a different kind of hard, one that tests our memory at the start instead of our ability to untangle complex rules later on.